Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our NDRI webinar about Indigenous-led research in practice. My name is Shelley Walker. I'm a research fellow in the Justice Health team at the National Drug Research Institute based in Naarm, and I'm joining you here from my home on Wurundjeri country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, this stolen land on which I'm speaking, and recognise that this webinar is taking place across many other unceded lands. I pay my respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present, and to the elders of all the lands on which people are joining today, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar with us. I'd also like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's enduring connections to country, culture and community, and the vital role of Indigenous knowledges in shaping research and practice, and to remind us all of the ongoing strength, resilience and leadership of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, which is reflected in the work and leadership of the three researchers who we are really fortunate to be hearing from today. In this session, our speakers will reflect on the principles, practices and impacts of Indigenous-led research across health, justice and community settings. Drawing on diverse projects and experiences, we'll explore how Indigenous methodologies, knowledge systems and leadership shape research that is culturally grounded, community-driven and oriented towards meaningful change. Together, their presentations will explore the importance of relational accountability, co-design and Aboriginal ways of knowing, being and doing, while at the same time centring lived experience, redistributing power in research and considering the role of non-Indigenous researchers as ethical and responsive allies. Each of our presenters will talk for around 10 minutes each, and then we'll open up for questions at the end. We're using the Q&A function for questions, so feel free to just post your questions as they come up as you're listening to the speakers. And I also wanted to introduce, although I think she's disappeared, but my colleague, Sam Colledge-Brisby, who's here with us too, who'll be supporting the webinar behind the scenes and dealing with any tech issues that come up. And she and I will work through the questions together at the end. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our first presenter, Associate Professor Jocelyn Jones, who I'm really fortunate to have been working alongside in my project that I'm currently working on about police custody and young people. Jocelyn is a Noongar woman with Whadjuk, Balladong and Balku connections to country in Western Australia. She's a Vice-Chancellor, Professoriate Research Fellow within Curran-Curl Cardigan at Edith Cowan University. Her work focuses on Aboriginal health, justice and policy, and she has extensive experience working across Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, government and research settings. So I will hand over to you, Jocelyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Hi all, thanks for joining us for this webinar. The title of my presentation is No One Has Asked Us Before, From Silence to Leadership in Custodial Research. Before I start, I would just like to acknowledge also our traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on. I'm meeting on Whadjuk land in Burraloo, Perth, and I'd like to recognise our continuing connection to land, sea, culture and the community, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So I'd like to introduce our team. So this is our research team. Our project was funded through ANROS. We have collaborations with Aboriginal young men in custody and in community, the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre in Port Hedland, Serco, Curtin University, University of Melbourne and University of Sydney, So that just gives a little picture there of our research team, cultural advisors, and our lived experience advisor and our chief investigation team. So this project is being done out at Acacia Prison, which is about one hour's drive east of Perth. It's built on Balladong Budja. It's a private prison that's operated by Serco Asia Pacific. It's been in operation since May 2001. It's classed as a medium security prison. The current capacity it fluctuates, but it's up past 1,371 men. So the focus of my presentation is looking at cultural safety within a prison setting and how to conduct culturally safe research. So within Acacia Prison, they have a cultural focus unit, which is led by a cultural advisor, Brooke Dillon. It's based within the prison and plays a key role in welcoming men and affirming their connection to their home community, as well as support services. So they also have a cultural meeting place. So cultural meeting places within custodial settings are very important. They provide a vital place for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to reconnect with identity, culture and community. It enables yarning, cultural practice and guidance from elders, supporting social and emotional wellbeing. So it's more than symbolic. It's a space that acts as protective, that promotes healing. It strengthens cultural identity and contributes to more positive outcomes during and beyond custody. Oh, I'm having trouble moving these slides. What's happening? Okay. So just briefly, this research is working with justice involved young Aboriginal men, asking about their experiences and views on violence and prevention of family, domestic and sexual violence. So the definition of cultural safety that's guiding this research is one that was developed and led by Megan Williams. So cultural safety is an environment that is spiritually, socially and emotionally safe, as well as physically safe for people, where there is no assault, challenge or denial of their identity, of who they are and what they need. It's about a shared respect, shared meaning, shared knowledge and culture of learning together with dignity and truly listening. So to guide our research, cultural governance is central. So by ensuring that the research is guided by Aboriginal ways of knowing, doing and being. So our elders play a key role in shaping the processes and decision making, as well as providing cultural authority, oversight and direction through the project. This shifts accountability away from being solely institutionally driven towards being accountable to the community and its values, its protocols and its priorities. In practice, this means decisions are not made in isolation by researchers, but are informed by cultural leadership and grounded in relationships, ensuring that the work remains respectful, relevant and responsible to those it is intended to serve. So that's one of the things we look at about, what is that benefit of the research? So we've got, we're working with a co-researcher model, which positions incarcerated young men as active contributors rather than passive participants with meaningful influence across the research process. They help shape the research questions, so the focus reflects what matters in their lives. It guides how data is collected in culturally safe and relevant ways, as well as a key role in interpretation of the findings to ensure that the analysis is accurate and grounded in their lived experience. So why do we have co-research, and why does that feedback matter? So it checks whether findings reflect men's lived realities. It reduces the researcher misinterpretation. It identifies culturally unsafe language, tools and processes. It supports ethical reciprocity by returning findings back to the men, and it builds those pathways from data collection to action. So just some of the feedback from our last lot of discussions that we had by presenting some preliminary results and issues that we'd come across in the research. So from the young men, which were the research participants, they said it was good to get some things off my chest during the interview. It's not good to be holding stuff back and not saying stuff to other people. Sometimes people can help you and make you feel good. There's just a few more things there, but I won't have time to read them all. So the yarning and feedback sessions with the co-researchers. So these are the mentors and house uncles. So young men are lost, angry and impatient. There is a lack of support for young men in prison. So fuck you system attitude prevails. This hampers engagement with services. It's easier for young men to be angry than sad. This was raised as an issue within the prison context. There are groups of incarcerated men who are vulnerable with each other and talk things over, and others that are not. One mentor expressed that it was difficult for those who do talk about things and pointed to the older men to pass this on and open up to the silent groups and include young men. So, building those relationships where based on trust. So men in protection had a different set of issues that they faced. So the main issues was identity, trust, cultural safety, and Aboriginal-led support as being essential to meaningful engagement. So what are some of the implications for the research and systems? So for research, we need to move beyond consultation to genuine co-ownership. Cultural governance is essential. For custodial systems, we need to create space for cultural authority. We need to recognise young men as contributors and knowledge holders. For policy and programs, we need to invest in custodial-led, strengths-based approaches. We need to support leadership pathways for young men in custody. Thank you.
You're on mute, Shelley.
On mute. Thanks so much, Jocelyn. I'd like to now introduce our second presenter, Associate Professor Robyn Williams. Robyn is a Noongar woman with extended family connections to the Gascoyne and Kimberley regions of Western Australia. She has over 25 years of experience across Aboriginal community organisations, government and academia. She's based at the Medical School of Curtin University, and her research focuses on the health and wellbeing of Aboriginal children, families and communities. Robyn is a national leader in fetal alcohol spectrum disorder research, shaping policy and advancing Aboriginal-led approaches that strengthen outcomes for families and communities. Over to you, Robyn.
Thank you. Okay, so it's lovely to be here today. And so what I'm sharing briefly, it actually comes from my doctoral study that I'm going to expand on in this short presentation. So I'm coming from the lands, the traditional lands of the Whadjuk people in Noongar country. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from where we're all coming from today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I recognise the strength and knowledge of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their ongoing contribution to community wellbeing and safety. So my family includes the extended mob in Noongar country, Yamatji country, which is the Gascoyne area, and also extends into the Kimberleys. Throughout my career, I've had the opportunity and privilege of living and working on Noongar country and Whadjuk. I also want to acknowledge the strong support and advocacy, and I'm just going to go to the next slide, from the Noongar community in approaching and responding to FASD in our community. It's also important that I acknowledge the local Aboriginal Medical Service, Derbyl Yerigan. On this slide is some of the key local Noongar people who provided valuable support and leadership throughout the study. So the people you see here, Miranda and Peter Farmer, Ken Kelly, and Dr. Karen Ugal. So it was also very important to have a male lens on the topic of FASD. I also have to acknowledge the mentoring and invaluable support that I received from Aboriginal FASD leaders, the late Dr. Jan Hamill and Dr. Lorianne Hayes. So this project was grounded in Aboriginal ways of knowing, being and doing, strength-based approaches that honour Aboriginal protocols, relationships and reciprocity. These frameworks also reflect an informal co-design process. So in the short time we have today, I want to highlight the importance of relationships and reciprocity. Dr. Marion Kickett, a Noongar academic, describes reciprocity in Noongar culture as good deeds that can be remembered for decades. So I also want to thank NDRI for the invitation to share our experiences on Aboriginal methods and frameworks in responding to FASD. So how the study began, and it's been quite a journey because I actually came to this topic, like the community, knowing very little, actually knowing nothing about FASD. So over 10 years ago, the study was initiated and requested by a kinship carer, an auntie who was raising 2 nephews with FASD. This auntie strongly advocated for greater awareness and support services. At the time, very little was known about FASD in our community, and supports for our children and kinship carers was almost non-existent. Please also see the comment shared here on this slide by one of our kinship carers. Australian literature also highlights the low level of sector awareness on FASD nationally, and FASD, as we know, is caused by prenatal alcohol exposure, is globally the most common disability, yet remains one of the most stigmatised, unrecognised and misdiagnosed disabilities. Compounding this is the significant gaps in the literature, which includes the absence of voices from our Aboriginal kinship carers, and also culturally preferred ways of approaching FASD in our community. While FASD is not solely an Aboriginal issue, evidence shows disproportionate rates among Indigenous people in Australia, linked to intergenerational impacts of colonisation, poor social determinants of health, and systemic racism. Further research also identifies that children and adults with FASD remain overrepresented in child protection and justice settings. So I'll just go to the next slide. The study was mixed methods, and as I said, it was underpinned by Aboriginal methodologies and existing relationships in the community. We sought to explore baseline knowledge of community awareness and the lived experiences of our families raising Aboriginal children with FASD. Importantly, frameworks and relationships also laid the important foundation for being culturally and trauma-informed throughout the design, engagement, and implementation of this study. Being trauma and culturally informed was critical, as FASD is a topic that is easy to further stigmatise. It is also important to understand the nuances and intersection of colonisation, racism and disability in our community. So the survey tool was developed and co-designed with a reference group and was piloted with community for acceptance before I went out on country and engaged with 180 participants, which, as you can see there, included 109 females and 71 males. And this engagement occurred across 5 country towns and included Perth. So as a Noongar researcher myself, I have many family and community connections in these sites of data collection. And this was also important for engagement with community on the sensitive topic of yarning about FASD. The survey was delivered in a hard copy format rather than online, and this was a conscious decision. And the survey tool also acted as a good icebreaker in starting the yarn about FASD in our community. If we'd have delivered the survey tool online, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to facilitate two-way learning and have that rich engagement that you need when we're working with community. The artwork that you see here on the bottom of the slide was donated by Noongar artist Peter Farmer Sr. and represents the birthing tree, which is a symbol of cultural significance in Noongar country and other Aboriginal cultures. The word kulungas in the survey title is the Noongar word for babies and young children. So the survey questions were contextualised for history and culture. And this slide here highlights some of the key findings. The majority of participants, as you can see, identified that they or an immediate member of their family were part of the stolen generations. Participants also shared their preferred ways of learning and yarning about FASD was not surprisingly in community forums and face-to-face. And 21% of participants received information on FASD from their families, highlighting another strength in our community, and this was almost as high as health promotions. So, okay. So just some of the lessons and takeaways from undertaking the study is the importance of being open to community feedback, be well prepared on your research topic and be able to give back knowledge. Aboriginal methods supports a seamless translation into practice for our community. Overwhelmingly, from the survey engagement and yarning with community on country, 2 major priorities were identified. The first was the request for FASD awareness to also include intervention and support for our families. The second was community's request for FASD training at each site. This became an outcome that I also needed to prepare for and deliver FASD training back in community on country while also completing the final stages of this study. Reciprocity in this project also meant responding to those priorities identified by community. FASD training, while it was not an original aim of the study, was then adapted and integrated the key findings from our study. Training now remains ongoing and occurs not only in WA but also throughout other states. So as I start to wrap up my little session here, in summary, our next steps is the pilot of the Solid Families program and supporting healthy pregnancies and young families and ongoing training with ACOs and sector. Aboriginal ways and methods were key to driving and sustaining the translation of knowledge on FASD into meaningful practice at the community level. Grounding the work with an Aboriginal lens ensured that the community also determined the priorities and pathways forwards. This approach strengthened capacity building for supporting children and adults with FASD, both in prevention and across the lifespan, guided by Noongar knowledges, community leadership, and the lived experiences in our state. And the last slide that I'll share with you is if you're interested in having a further look at the methods and some of the key findings, you'll see there at the top is the title of the study, and these are 2 publications that have now been published. Okay, so thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Robyn. And now I would like to, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Professor Kelly Menzel. Kelly is a proud Nudgeri woman from the mid-north of South Australia with ancestral connections to the Bundjalung Nation. She's a director of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Initiative at Burnett Institute, and her work focuses on Indigenous research methodologies, Indigenous knowledge systems, and transforming research practice within universities and communities. She has contributed to national conversations on Indigenous-led scholarship and the place of Indigenous knowledges within the academy. So I'll hand over to you now. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Shell. Wow, thank you for such a lovely intro. That actually sounds really fancy, doesn't it? I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. Is my screen? Can people see the my presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Firstly, I would like to thank Jocelyn and Robyn for their presentations before me, and Andrew for inviting us today. I really appreciate it. And I would also like to pay my respects to other Aboriginal people, other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room. And I'm just going to move my little screen on and acknowledge today I'm coming to you from the lands of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, the traditional custodians of the lands that Burnett Institute is located on. I am an Adju Bundjalung woman, and I reside normally in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales on the lands of the Widjabul people of the wider Bundjalung Nation. And so I would also like to extend my acknowledgement and respect to the elders of that community and to all other communities that are here today. My presentation is on, and I'm going to have to go back to the first slide. About 1,000 years ago, it feels like, it was 2023, the end of 2023, I, along with my colleague, Dr. Charmaine Burney, got a very, very small grant to undertake a pilot project looking at caregiver perspectives of Jarjums, so Aboriginal kids in the Bundjalung area with emerging developmental needs. And we started this particular project. We knew it was going to be slow to get the ball rolling, but in no way did we predict how long it would take to undertake the project. But to get the project in a place that was being done in the right way, we wanted to ensure we were undertaking all of the correct protocols in the community. So why the work mattered was that Aboriginal children with emerging developmental needs are often not even just misunderstood, it's under-supported, engaged late, not identified, and systems are not designed for relational and culturally grounded care. And often caregiver voices, which are frequently women, are rarely centred in research or service design, and co-design there's very little information. So we were really keen to centre the voices of the Aboriginal community. Because it was a pilot project, we wanted to keep the project on Bundjalung country, which is where we're both based, and we wanted to work with the community to find out what those needs of the carers were. And we agonised over language, and we landed on carers and caregivers because we wanted to acknowledge kinship systems in the community. And so we set about trying to undertake this particular project. We wanted to ensure that we had appropriate cultural protocol in place, and so we took our ideas to the Guinea Elders Council, which is an elders council that is part of a university where I reside on Bundjalung country, Southern Cross University, but they are actually respected elders from across the Bundjalung Nation and the Gumbaynggirr Nation in northern New South Wales. And so we wanted to make sure our research was grounded in their ways of knowing, being and doing of the community. And we've got some pretty staunch elders on that on that council. So boy, did they school us really well, which was fantastic. And we wanted to centre caregivers as knowledge holders, not participants. And we knew we wanted to undertake a yarning circle or a set of yarning circles with the community. And it took a really, really long time to establish trust in the community, with a lot of leveraging of relationships and being vouched for. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is I cannot be more grateful to my colleague, Dr. Charmaine Burney. She is a non-Aboriginal woman, and I don't think that this research would have continued if it weren't for her. She, as part of her role that she was in at the time, she was in a research position that was very short-lived. It was only 3 years, and this particular project was part of her KPIs. And it became very clear very quickly that we were not going to meet her particular KPIs because they were time-centric, they were Western-centric, and that was so misaligned with the methodologies that we wanted to utilise in this particular process. And we had to set up appropriate governance, and that was going to take lots of time and relationship building. And she could have easily have walked away. This could have easily fallen over as a project, and she didn't. She stuck with it. She was really humble and just really stuck with her ethics in wanting to undertake this particular project and see it all the way through. So we weren't able to undertake our first yarning circle until the end of last year. So it took us 2 years of relationship building, of visits, of meeting elders in the community, of being vouched for, of making sure we had all the right processes in place before we even wanted to embark on a yarning circle. And we undertook it with one centre in Casino, which is in northern New South Wales country. And it's an Aboriginal safe space. It's not an Aboriginal childcare centre, but it certainly is respected and utilised by the community. And so they gifted us their time and their energy and their space, and the elders that are at that particular centre sat with us and also sat with us in the yarning circle to ensure protocols were safe and that everyone felt comfortable saying what they needed to say. And we were able to get some, and it was all women that came in. They're all caregivers of Bunjalung children, and they were so giving of their time and their energy and their knowledges. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't take the time building the relationship with this one centre. We had very grand aspirations at the beginning of the project that we were hoping we could do more than one centre, and there was no way in reality we could do that. And like I said, Charmaine just adapted and accepted that it would take time and relationship building to undertake it. And we were able to have the yarning circle, and there have been some amazing findings that have emerged from that, but we're still in the process of taking that back to the community to co-design our next steps to be able to set up some solutions for the community. And we have been doing that in close collaboration and co-design also with the Childcare Centre. So of this project, it would never have been able to continue if she had not been such a staunch ally. She pushed back on the university that gave us the funding and said, I'm not going to meet my KPIs, and I'm okay with that. We're not going to meet certain artificial timelines because we need to spend the time building the relationships, creating a safe environment. Otherwise, we're just harming people. I don't know if I could have done that as an Aboriginal scholar. She took those bullets for me, and that was really, really important. And I could not be more grateful, because this has turned out to be an incredibly important project, but also an incredibly fulfilling project that I think is probably going to take us another 2 or 3 years to complete, even though we each of us no longer work for the organisation that we started at, but we feel so strongly about this particular community, and we have built such strong relationships with the community. So she has done all the hard behind the scenes work, the administration. She didn't position herself as a lead. She just said, I'm going to take some of this burden away so that you can build the relationships with the community. She provided some of the institutional navigation when I couldn't. She stepped back from authority and has in fact, been really humble in that process. And she has listened and learned in really kind ways and has held space without wanting to control it. And I think that has just been such a standout to me, because that's where often in research processes where we're driven by Western models of having to live by time and artificial deadlines, that a lot of this kind of research falls over. So allyship in this instance wasn't just a collaboration, it was way more than that. It was a redistribution of power. She ceded space so the community could occupy it safely. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because like I said, so often projects fall down, don't proceed in ways that they should, and all we're doing is perpetuating harm. And this I feel isn't. So I think it's a really important story to celebrate. And that was kind of the message that I wanted to talk about today. So in terms of right way, what I mean by that is Indigenous leadership is a non-negotiable in these situations. Relationships and reciprocity and relationality are not additional to, they are the methodology. Time is a resource and not a constraint. And in these situations, allies, and Charmaine has in this instance been really accountable. She's said when she's been uncomfortable, she's said when she's felt challenged, and she's been really reflexive in doing that. And she's relinquished control. She's just said, right, it takes as long as it takes, and this is just where we're at. And she was an unbelievable support without centering herself at all. So it's not about inclusion in existing systems. It's about challenging the system and transforming it, and those in those systems to think and listen and then act. So yes, that is my particular story that I wanted to share. And this beautiful piece of artwork is not just attached to this particular project, but I'm sharing it with the permission of Ricky Salam, who is working with me at Burnett on the work that I'm doing here. So just wanted to end that with a beautiful piece of artwork. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly. That is so beautiful. That artwork. I love it. I'd just like to thank the three of you so much, Jocelyn, Robyn and Kelly, for sharing such insightful and really thought-provoking presentations. There's so much there, I think, for us to reflect on. And, one of the things that really stood out for me across all the presentation was the particular importance of relationships, and I loved what you just said, Kelly, relationships is a method though, not an add-on. And I think, for me, just the thing that I have to constantly, remind myself is the importance of listening as an ally, and being able to step back and give the, hand it over, being able to hand it over. What I would really like to do now, though, is to open it up for questions. I'm hoping some people might have been popping some things in the chat for us that we can put to Kelly, Robyn, and Jocelyn, or all three of them. But I can't see anything in the chat at the moment, but maybe I'm looking in the wrong spot.
There's a question in the Q&A, and hey, thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks, Robyn. Thanks, Kelly. Those were really wonderful presentations. We do have a question for Jocelyn that we can start with. So Jocelyn, this question's from Martin Gillies. What prompted this work to be completed at Acacia rather than a DOJ prison? And to your knowledge, is there any indication from DOJ as to whether they would expand the cultural offering at Acacia to other sites?
Okay, I don't think there was any sort of evidence-based reason. I guess we had some ongoing relationships with Acacia. So when we developed the program, we approached them first. Working in research in the justice system takes a long time. Our project was only 2 years till completion, and it took nearly a year to get ethics I think it was 9 months. So I guess that kind of helped the decision as well, even though we had to go to RAP. But like I said, we had that relationship, so we didn't have to sort of, build something new, even though I've got a relationship with the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice have been looking at the Acacia cultural unit model and ways that they might be able to implement that across the whole custodial setting. I'm not sure how far that's progressed. Brooke and her team do get called on at certain times to support other prisons. It's something that's sort of been, slowly sort of developing and infiltrating the other sort of prisons. But being a private prison as well, there's sort of different, not restrictions, but they're able to be more flexible, I guess is the word. I mean, that's really how John talks about it, who's the superintendent out at Acacia. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Perfect. Renee's got a question for you, Kelly. Have you written about this anywhere? Is there a resource that Renee can access that sort of has these thoughts jotted down? I think we've all got that question.
That's a really good question. And I was only talking with Charmaine about it like last week. We're in the process of writing up a couple of manuscripts and our findings. We're still co-designing some resources with the women from the childcare centre. And from such a small project, so much rich information has come out of it. And we're like, this is more than one piece of work. Like there's work here that needs to be written about the project and the work that we're doing with the women, but then there's the work between us and our relationship we think needs to be separate too. So we're in the process of, we've used an Indigenous methodological approach of going out and walking on country and yarning, and we've been talking about like all of the things like that have emerged in our relationship over time, and we're going to write it up and hopefully publish it maybe in a couple of places. So it's not yet published, but we're in the process of trying to weave it back together to be able to tell that story, because I think it is a really important experience in how to do research together from different cultural, places that I think other people might be able to sort of like identify with. So yeah, so not quite yet, but we're in the process of trying to pull that together so we can share it. So we'll keep you posted.
And I was just going to, can I just give a quick plug for your book, Kelly? Because Kelly has recently published with a colleague of hers, Bindi Bennett, a book called Indigenous Research Knowledges and Their Place in the Academy that is really very valuable and worth purchasing for your, and reading. And I don't know whether I'll have a look and could I just put a link in the chat maybe? No, because people won't see that.
Thank you, Shelley.
That's right. Pop it in the Q&A, Shell.
Okay, great.
People will be able to see that. This question isn't directed to anyone specifically, but I'll throw it out there. What can government agencies and other funding bodies do differently or better to support trust building and genuine community engagement and research that they fund? I'm sure everyone has something of an answer. Robyn, did you want to maybe comment on that? You're on mute, Robyn. Robyn, you're just on mute.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think that I'm going to kind of answer it from a bit differently. I think that a lot of the important work that needs to be done is actually often being funded by research grants. First of all, let me kind of just put that out there. And that's a lot of work in that, like trying to get the grants and then to be able to work with community. If I think about the experiences of our community when we wanted to do this study, on FASD that actually took 2 years just to get a small amount of funding. So this is, and if we want to think about our next generation of Aboriginal researchers coming through, we want that pathway to be not as challenging, if I could say, in able to get access to funding.
Yeah. I don't know, Kelly or Jocelyn, if either of you wanted to comment on that too.
I'll just say, I think it's about building relationships as well with Aboriginal researchers and also government agencies knowing their communities. So I think, the thing we've had as Aboriginal people is government's always doing research on us, not with us. So I think it's about, building that community collaboration, empowering the community, giving them self-determination around the research. So really bringing your community along. And I think most importantly, it's about doing the research the community want. And I think we've all talked about that today. So, we're sick of hearing bad news pretty much. And unfortunately, a lot of the governments want to, that's what it is about, looking at that stuff, at issues from a deficit model. And I don't know, but I get kind of tired of seeing that, we kind of know a lot of that already. And I think also, what is the output? What's the outcome? Is it the government do research, but what is the intervention, or what is the prevention, or what is the program that's been developed? And I think that's one of the other main issues is if the community sees that government is serious about their issues and they want to make proper change, then there needs to be an outcome that is of benefit, and we all should be doing that research that is benefiting the community. So I think there has to be that genuine opportunity to work with communities coming from those kind of perspectives. That's what I've got to say.
Kelly, did you want to add anything?
I 100% agree. I think research has to be led by the community as the experts. People live in their own communities. They're the experts of their own business. Doesn't matter whether people have PhDs or not. Fancy researchers come in, they're not members of the community. It has to be owned, led by the community for the sovereignty of the community that it's benefiting.
Yeah. Beautiful. We haven't got any more questions in the Q&A, but I just wanted to ask something. And just to note for everyone who's listening, our speakers have kindly allowed us to kind of go over time if we have a few more questions. So please feel free to hang on the line. One of the questions that I was thinking about, Kelly, when you were speaking was, what are the things that non-Indigenous colleagues who are maybe trying to be allies, perhaps they're really well-intentioned, what are the things that they are doing in a well-intentioned way that are just really missing the mark? And maybe perhaps some common mistakes that we can be accountable for going forward?
I think one of the things I think I would suggest is a really good starting point is in research, whether we're research institutes, universities, or even government and things like that, we're driven by particular agendas. And so therefore we are told, fill the gap. If there's research to be done, fill the gap. And that's not necessarily aligned with Indigenous research approaches, communities, those kind of things. So ask yourself why you want to do the research. I think that's probably one of the first things, why you want to be in particular spaces. And if you're there, is there an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person who could be leading it? And if all of that is, like you're able to do research with an Aboriginal person who's leading it and those kind of things, then that's fantastic. But I think that's a really good starting point. And that requires relinquishing some of the things that we get from the, pushed within our sector, like I said, fill the gap, get the money, do the things within the time frame. Is to try and not be pushed by those things, but pushed by a different ethical approach, a different relationship building, and the kind of the things that we've talked about today. So it requires a little bit of different thinking in that respect.
Really well said. I don't know, Robyn or Jocelyn, if you wanted to add to that at all. Jocelyn's okay.
I just really wanted to support what Kelly was saying, and that question of why, the question of why you want to do it, and also again what Kelly's talked to about capacity building, because that's what's really really critical. What kind of capacity building, and what kind of reciprocity, and really understanding what reciprocity is in our community, because us as Aboriginal researchers, we're held to a very high standard by our community in terms of those protocols and about reciprocity, and allowing, as we've said today, communities to also inform the priorities, and and just picking up what Jocelyn said earlier too, really moving away from that deficit-based lens and towards a strength-based. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Well, Shell, do you want me to share the last slide, just plugging the next webinar?
That would be lovely.
Thank you. Okay. So we have a webinar coming up again in May on the 20th. It's at 11 a.m. WA time, 1 p.m. East Coast time. We have amazing presenters from around the country discussing the topic of decriminalisation. So we have Dr. Paul Kaleda, who's a research fellow at UNSW Sydney, Associate Professor Caitlin Hughes from Flinders University, and then Chris Goff, who's the Executive Director at CARMA. Would love to see you all there. I just want to thank our amazing presenters today for their time, and thank you to everyone who jumped on to listen. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.